Hi, my name is Strauss. I am the author of the YA time travel book called Clockwise, about a teenage time traveler who accidentally takes her secret crush back in time. And what I'm going to talk about today is structure. I know a lot of people, when they're writing a book, they get all excited at the beginning, and then they find that they lose steam halfway through and they can't make it to the end. And so sometimes if you plan a little bit ahead of time, this can help you with your book, getting all the right pieces in the right places and actually being able to type in the end. So one way that piece of advice I can give you that might help you is to use the 3-act story structure. Now, if you are familiar with movies, you've probably heard of this, or screenwriters. And so I'm just going to show you this little sketch that I drew, and hopefully you can see it. There's the 3-act story structure. In the beginning of Act 1, there's the inciting incident and the plot point 1, which launches you into Act 2, which is actually twice as long as Act 1 and Act 3. It's actually 2 parts, and in the middle you have something called the midpoint or midpoint reversal, and that ends with a plot point 2, and then at the end of Act 3 you have the climax and resolution. So I'm going to just use Clockwise as an example because this is a story that I know really well, and it won't take me that long to explain. So what happens in your first act? In your first act, you need to have your opening scene. My cat just walked in the door. Your opening scene, and then you have your inciting incident, and you'll meet probably the love interest and maybe even the villain, or not. Depends on your book. Now, the inciting incident is important because if this event never happened, the story wouldn't happen. So it's the event that triggers the whole story. So in Clockwise, for instance, Casey, who's a time traveler, she can't control when she goes back in time, and she doesn't go back all the time, except that it seems like in this point in her life she's doing a lot of that. The inciting incident is when she's at a football field with her friend and she's watching her secret crush practice football, and he misses the catch, and it goes over his head, and it comes towards her, and then without thinking she jumps up and she catches it. Now all of a sudden the whole field and the whole football team is looking at her, and it's causing a great deal of stress. And then Nate, her secret crush, starts to walk towards her, and she starts to panic, and stress is one of the things that triggers her trips back. And she does. She goes back and she takes Nate's football with her. And that is the inciting incident that starts the whole story. If she hadn't jumped up and caught the ball and just left it to topple off, this story wouldn't start. That's the inciting incident. Then you're going to get, before you break into Act 2, you're going to get a plot point that's quite significant, that's going to accelerate your story a little bit more. So in Clockwise, what happens is her best friend talks Casey into going to a prom or a fall dance. Of course, Casey doesn't want to dance. She doesn't want to be noticed. She's trying to stay on the radar because she's trying to not trip back into the time so much. And also she's learned that if she's touching people skin to skin, she can take them back with her. Of course, she's not always thinking about these things when she should. And at the dance, to her great astonishment, Nate, her secret crush, asks her to dance. And without thinking, she says yes. And of course, the unthinkable happens, and she takes him back in time. So that's the plot point that breaks us into Act 2. Now I'm going to show you another chart of the 3-act structure to show you that it's not actually a linear line that's flat, but it's actually a line that goes uphill. You see that? It says rising tension and conflict. So as you're writing your story, you want to keep thinking about how you can increase the tension. It also has to get more difficult, more trying, more tension between your protagonist and her love interest, more trouble between them and your villain. Um, so now we're in Act 2. So what kinds of things are going to go on in Act 2? Like I mentioned, you're going to raise the stakes. Things are going to get harder and more complicated, rising tension. But this is also a place where, place where you're going to develop those subplots, because you don't just have one storyline when you're writing a novel. You'll have maybe 2 or 3 subplots as well. And then you're going to hit your midpoint halfway through the story, what can also be called the midpoint reversal, where something really drastic happens to change the direction of how your story is going. So for instance, in Clockwise, in the midpoint, all the way up to this point, Casey and Nate are in the past, and they're in 1860, so they can't, they have to pretend to be brother and sister, because you can't be hanging around with the opposite sex without a chaperone unless you're siblings. And so they work for a family on the farm, but there's also this wealthy suitor who has taken a shining to Casey, and it's created all of this weird tension, because Nate is kind of acting strange. He has to be the brother figure, but he's kind of jealous of this new guy, Robert, and Robert's a bit of a slimeball. We're not sure if we like him or not. And Casey's confused by Nate's behavior towards her, because up to now she's been sort of this wallflower, and he's this really popular guy, and they don't run in the same circles. So her fear is that when they get back to the present and get back to school, that it will go back to being that, because she would really like their friendship to remain and would like it to be more. And so what happens when they go back and they get back to school the next day, what she fears happens, and Nate, he barely acknowledges her presence, and so her world is shattered now, and she's really distraught. And so that's the kind of thing where it's kind of going one way, and you think, oh, okay, I think I know what's going to happen now, and then something suddenly happens and changes the whole game. And so then when you get to plot point 2, it's kind of like what plot point 1 has. Something significant happens, and it throws you into the last act. And it's sort of, plot point 2 is sort of the catalyst of, all heck is going to break loose now, and your protagonist, like, all is lost, and it's a dark night of the soul, and there's no way of knowing how this story is going to end up happy. And so then Act 3 is, of course, where the climax happens. There's the encounter with the villain, and the misunderstandings, and everything's, a waste and a wreck. And then it resolves, and the story resolves, and we have a satisfying ending. Okay, actually here it has a visitor. This is Biff. Biff is my muse. He helps me to write. So anyways, that's sort of the basic. That is actually quite a basic illustration of what the 3-act structure is. I do also have some how to write tips on my blog, where I cover in more detail about the inciting incident and the plot points, midpoints, and also other writing tips as well about character and pacing and voice and stuff. So if you'd like to visit me at my blog, it's www.lstraussbook.blogspot.com, and that will be on the site here, along with some examples from Clockwise. So thank you for having me today. I really hope that you're inspired to go back to your book and plot out your different themes and get through to the end.